What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Prayin and Slayin podcast. I'm your host, Aaron, and I'm excited today to have Kendrick Chittock from the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance for another Operation Conservation episode. I got connected with Kendrick actually through some work with Dead Nuts, getting these guys connected up to do some really cool collaborations with some Rocky Mountain goat targets that they have through Dead Nuts, and some really cool things that Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance is doing to just help support the awesome animals that are out there and hopefully build some bigger populations and support the future of chasing those crazy critters. This episode is brought to you by Dead Nuts Outdoors. Go check those guys out, and if you want a special discount and to support Light the Fire Outdoors' Veterans and Conservation Mission Operation Texas, go ahead and go over to our link in the show notes and get yourself 10% off your Dead Nuts target purchase. Get tuned up for the fall. You really can't find a better way to tune up than shooting at the real thing in your backyard. These things are lightweight, they're portable, they have replaceable vital zones, and it doesn't get more realistic when it comes to a practice session than shooting at a Dead Nuts target. Like I said, go check them out for 10% off with the link in our show notes, and a portion of those proceeds is also going to go back to our Veterans and Conservation Mission here at Light the Fire Outdoors. With that, guys, let's jump in with Kendrick and learn more about the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance. Man. Well, Kendrick, welcome to the Prayin and Slayin podcast. It's awesome to have you on here, man. I know it was, I think you're the fastest guest I've ever gone from introduction to scheduled, so I appreciate the openness to get on the mic here. And yeah, man, looking forward to learning about you. We got connected through Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance and some stuff that we were working on with Dead Nuts Outdoors, and I just got really excited about you in particular. You're an outdoors photographer. You have a really cool business with that. Sounds like your family's all in kind of the arts a little bit. You connected me with your brother, who's an outdoors writer, it sounds like, or a writer in general. So got some mutual interest there. And then obviously we're here to talk about the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance and hopefully hear a cool goat story or two.
Yeah, you got it. Well, my pleasure to be here and glad we could make it happen. Yeah, it was cool to connect via the Goat Alliance and hear what you guys are doing at Dead Nuts. And yeah, hope to hear more about the Prayin and Slayin too. So thanks for having
Yeah,
me.
yeah, you bet, man. Absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit about you, man. So obviously, like I said, outdoor photographer. You've got some really cool. You can see the video on the podcast for anybody watching. You can see some really cool photos in the background taken by Kendrick there. How'd you get into the outdoors in general? You've kind of got a few interests out there, as far as conservation, outdoor photography, maybe some hunting background. How'd you get involved with that?
Yeah, I mean, it started for a lot of people like as a kid, growing up, I lived in a rural area that basically, I'm based in Northeast Ohio, and what happens in Ohio is that if you're south of the Lake Erie water line, as a city, you can't draw water from the lake, and so generally cities below that line make reservoirs, and around those reservoirs are a lot of land that they partner with the state on to manage for sort of public hunting and fishing opportunities. And I grew up right next to one of those. So when I was a little kid, I sort of had my own little national forest back there and could roam around. And it was a great way to sort of get familiar with the outdoors. And then, grew up fishing most of my life and got into fly fishing in college, which really sort of sent me over the edge to really loving, the outdoors. And it was interesting. I did my graduate school down in New Zealand, which we can talk more about. There's some cool stuff down there, but I went. I wasn't hunting there, so actually, all my hunting buddies now are they still make fun of me for not hunting anything when I was down there.
For
But
sure.
it sort of worked out because my last weekend there, a friend of mine took me spear fishing, and it was this interesting overlap between all this fishing I was doing and sort of being curious about hunting and transitioning into that. And one of the fish that I speared, fed a family of 8 that night. And I was like, oh, this is the coolest thing. I'm learning how to hunt. So when I got home, one of my childhood friends, he's a fantastic hunter. He taught me how to hunt and I taught him how to fly fish. And from there, we just started kind of doing our trips and everything. So that's the hunting and fishing side. And then, yeah, I mean, I went to school for environmental science and natural resource management. And then I worked full time at what's called a land trust. It's a private conservation organization for 8 or 9 years. And while I was doing that, I then was taking photos and writing for magazines and submitting after our trips, that kind of a thing. And it just got to a point where I was ready to try my own thing and work for myself. So I left that job and did the photography and writing, and around the same time, I picked up some of my work with the Goat Alliance. So it all kind of came together about 4 years ago, and it's been a great mix. I'm happy about it, and yeah, it's led me to some great people like yourself. So it's been awesome.
Heck yeah, I mean that's a heck of a journey. So that's sweet, dude. I love the connection between you had a buddy that got you into hunting in exchange for fly fishing. I when we
That's
were
right.
stationed at my wife's Air Force, so we were stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base, and I was kind of like the ringleader, I feel like, of the hunting in our neighborhood. Everybody was like
Mhm.
always fascinated. I'm leaving out there with backpacks and rifles and bows and stuff all the time, and curiosity finally picks in. But then there was a buddy of mine named Kevin who was down the street, and he got heavy into fly fishing there. Kind of
Mhm.
took a couple lessons, kind of taught himself, and that was our deal too. He's like, dude, if you can teach me how to hunt, I'll teach you how to fly fish. So I remember catching my first big old rainbow. I think I got like a 2 pound rainbow trout with him. Was my first fish on the fly, and then
Mhm.
we ended up. I never, ironically enough, I was never with him when he got an animal in the field, but he came along with me on several hunts and kind of learned the ropes and got to
Yeah.
watch me get a couple deer with a rifle. Got to watch me get a deer with a bow, and yeah, and then he was all into bow hunting and gun hunting, and then watching him mentor his wife. He got her into hunting, and a couple of the other neighbors got into hunting because he was into it, and so it's kind
Mhm.
of a cool little chain effect. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome, man. And then fly fishing kind of pushed you over the edge. What was it about fly fishing that like just really wrapped you into saying, hey, like this is something I want to get involved with more?
Yeah. Well, I think looking back, maybe it's the artist in me, that really enjoyed the process of fly fishing and the casting and that whole experience. When I was I went to my undergrad was at Roanoke College down in Virginia, and so it was mainly trout fishing down there. And back home here, we have a tremendous steelhead fishery. That's lake run rainbows that are in and out of Erie. But in New Zealand, when you're fishing for brown trout down there, you're really hunting them. You're using very long leaders. You don't want to spook them. You don't want your shadow to get on the water. You're wearing neutral colors. So there was this, again, sort of this introductory feeling to hunting through fly fishing that I just really, really enjoyed. And I'd always loved fishing and being outside. So it was a nice sort of level up for me, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's cool, man. I never thought about brown trout as hunting them, but I think you're right. So in Montana, I probably did the most fishing I'd ever done, and that's where I got into fly fishing, obviously. But
Yep.
I never caught anything other than rainbows on the fly, but
Mhm.
did a ton of brook trout fishing, just literally hook and worm, and go out and find these little like mountain ponds where the beavers had dammed up the streams, and you can tear up a brookie all day, and they can pretty much watch you standing there on the water, And then rainbow, it's kind of like a little bit of a balancing act. But every brown trout I ever caught, whether it was growing up, we used to go to Colorado quite a bit like during the summers and we do some fishing out there.
Mhm.
Every brown you catch was like totally by accident. But looking back on it, where you'd catch them is like where whatever you're using for bait is like floating down the stream. They probably have no idea you're there. They're tucked up under a bank somewhere, whatever, and they just nail it. And you can kind of tell when you got a brown on there versus something else. But yeah, that's interesting. I never thought of it as trying to hunt them. You think that's similar in New Zealand as it is here?
Well, there are some places I would imagine in the States where you're doing more of that stalking. In New Zealand, it's a little more specific to sort of their terrain. They have these beautiful, rivers that sort of feed down into the fjords, and basically the water is so clear. So you can see all the way down to the bottom of even these deep holes. So those fish, they
Mhm.
can just see a lot more than a fish in, a river that's got a little color. I mean, certainly around here with our runoff rivers, but even out west, if you have some rivers that are running a little darker, they don't.
Mhm.
It's tougher to sort of do the sight fishing thing just because of the water.
Okay. No, that's really cool. Yeah. Yeah, clear water is definitely a different animal. I remember being up in Maine, it's a totally different thing there, but even the lakes are just insanely clear where you're at,
Oh,
and
I
you can
bet.
see forever down there, and you can see schools of like smallmouth or where the smallmouth nesting spots are. They
Mhm.
can see you, and you can see them, and yeah, that's nuts, man, for having deep pools and especially fast moving water like that. I think a lot of the spots we did in Colorado, it was like like a really deep green blue almost, so like it looks clear, but it's probably not quite as clear as what you're talking about.
Mm. Yeah,
But
that's great. That reminds me of, fishing up in Canada and seeing the pike or whatever. And yeah.
yeah, that's awesome, man. So as far as Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance, how did that connection like happen? Did you get reached out to by them? Did you reach out to them? What happened there?
Yeah, so when I switched to doing the photography and writing and the self-employment thing, that's a whole different game than having a salary every month,
Yeah.
right? So really what I was trying to do is sort of balance everything out where I could have that nice baseline personally for me. And then also I didn't want to, photography for me is this really great way to um, dive deeper into sort of that artistic aspect of my life. And so I support any photographer that's out there making it as a photographer. For me, I sort of wanted to have a little bit of a buffer around it so that I didn't have to do a certain amount of photography shoots that weren't as interesting to me, if that makes
Oh
sense.
yeah. Hmm.
So and I enjoyed conservation and obviously still love it. So the Goat Alliance was bringing people on at that point, and I reached out to them and talked to them about my background and what I was doing now, and it worked out perfectly for me. So most of my work is remote for them. I travel for different shows and fundraisers and that kind of a thing. But it was a great way to sort of stay connected with the conservation community while also still being able to maintain my photography work.
Very cool. And so is that specifically what you do now in your role at Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance? You and I got connected on kind of the fundraising style or partnership path with a brand. But primarily, are you out there taking photos and traveling and that kind of thing, or what's your primary role there?
Yeah, so for the Goat Alliance, I do the fundraising. So like we got connected, the sponsorships, and then the memberships, and then we also do like an online auction. We're going to do some raffles this year, major donor programs, that kind of a thing. But I do a bunch of other stuff too. So we have a group called the Science and Conservation Committee, which is the Goat Alliance is structured in a really cool way. They have a traditional nonprofit, fiduciary board that sets the strategy and has responsibility for the organization. And then they also have this science and conservation committee that I facilitate and help out with. And that's really a group of essentially third-party researchers that can look at different grants that are submitted to us. We distribute money through our conservation grant program that helps researchers to sort of run these different programs or collaring, mortality studies, things like that. So this group gives us this sort of extra brain, if you will, and keeps us you know, it keeps us aligned with the most up-to-date science for the organization to be able to make decisions and also to find priorities. So I do a bit of that, and then yeah, show season out there at Sheep Show and Hunt Expo, I'm doing all that kind of stuff too. So at a small nonprofit, it's a bit of a mix. So
Yeah. No, very cool, man. So you guys do fundraising and that kind of thing, and then obviously it sounds like a lot of what Goat Alliance is about is the science and research of it. So like, where and kind of how or why was it founded? I guess because it sounds like it's a little bit more science based than maybe some of these other organizations, just from the origin. Where a lot of times the story I hear is, it was a population decline, and they want to get money out there to support buying more habitat, putting it into that kind of thing. But your guys isn't, and from conversations we've had in the past a little bit different approach, and it's a lot more science based. It sounds like, if I'm understanding it right.
yeah, so the Goat Alliance, we cover the U.S. and Canada, and we really work in three main buckets. So I talked a little about the conservation grant program. So essentially, depending on the money that we raise, and the previous year we allocate a large portion of that to our conservation grant program. So we give that money to research students, PhDs, wildlife managers, biologists. Just depends on the projects that are submitted. The other bucket that we operate in is the education area. So the main sort of education that we do is helping hunters determine billies from nannies in the field. So most of the time, you're going to want to take a billy. There are some limited scenarios where there's maybe introduced herds where they need to keep the population down, and you might take a nanny. But generally, for the conservation of the species, it's much better to take a billy, the male, than the female. And that's just for obvious reasons of the females are going to have kids and the herd is going to stay larger over time. So we do a big chunk of that. We have stuff online on our YouTube channel, and then we also work with different wildlife agencies in the US and Canada to sort of administer these educational resources to people who draw mountain goat tags. And then the third bucket is really the thing that we were founded on about 10 years ago, which is what we call citizen science. And what happened is our founder years ago, a guy named Peter, realized that there was no specific group for mountain goats like there was for all these other awesome species that we have, elk and sheep and mule deer and all that. And, I think he's right. In my estimation, the mountain goat is perhaps our most iconic animal in many ways. And
Yeah.
it thrives in the highest areas of the continent. So I really appreciate that he pulled that together. But citizen science is essentially having volunteers help professional researchers to gather data that's reliable. So, if you're a scientist, you can listen to anecdotal information, right? And you ought to take it into account, but you can't write a journal article. You can't publish research based on, Aaron's 5 goats that he saw in the wild. It doesn't work like that. So what citizen science does is we worked with these wildlife biologists to create a set of standard operating procedures where people can go out into the mountains and count goats in a particular way that allows those wildlife managers to understand the population of goats there. So that's very helpful. There's a big data gap between mountain goats and all the other species, particularly because of those funding mechanisms around those species, because those organizations have done such a good job over the decades of building that up, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what we're trying to do, for the goat. So the citizen science is that third part, and that's what everyone loves. Honestly, the goat counts are a great thing to do. You can't use helicopters too much because they're expensive. It freaks the goats out when you do them too much. So you got to get boots on the ground. So yeah, that's kind of the 3 ways they operate.
That's awesome, man. I love I love that you get the public involved in like a goat count because one of the things you hear from a lot of other organizations is that when it comes to whatever it is, whether it's a fundraising banquet or whether they're going to go, they just bought this new property, they need to go do some kind of management on it or habitat cleanup or literally anything. It's like the volunteer piece is usually the lacking factor. But when you talk about I don't know anybody that's not going to be interested in my mind of saying, hey, like we're going to go count some mountain goats today and go into this crazy country. And I
Yeah.
love that you said like it's about the most iconic animal we have. And that's what I've always, from the time I first saw my first mountain goat, and that was in Montana, I'm like, there's just something crazy cool about them. They're just built different. There's something about them. You're just kind of like, you bring God into the picture. And it's just one of those animals you're like, you built that? Kind of like that's here. It's
Right.
like a crazy, almost otherworldly type animal. Where they live, kind of how they're built, or where their face is structured. There's something odd about them, but it's always been like a bucket list thing of mine. Maybe go chase one day, but it's definitely yeah, like you said, that they are the king of the mountain in my opinion, where they're at and what they do. And I was sitting at a total archery challenge one time and just had some dead time between people coming up to our booth, and I was
Mhm.
using my spotting scope and just practicing glassing on these different mountain ranges. And I spotted a group of mountain goats just cruising like a sheer rock face. Like how they were
Yeah.
doing it, I have no idea. But like, and the only reason I saw them was because they were out against that. They were hanging out in a snowbank and decided that they wanted to go somewhere else. But they just cruised across this, so dropping down around where a human would walk. Just
Yeah.
cruising unimaginable terrain. It's pretty
Mm.
iconic. And as far as the citizen science stuff too. I love that you brought up like how there's always seems to be a disconnect between what the perceived population is, depending on where you're at and who you are, versus what the science will maybe tell you. And like you said, you can't always publish it. But again, Montana in that picture, I don't know how many guys I would have that they live in a spot where you couldn't draw maybe or you had to draw a doe tag for a whitetail, for example, and you're like,
Mhm.
what are you talking about? They're everywhere, they're hitting them with their car on their way home from work, or they've got 20 in their
Sure.
backyard every day eating the grass. But like you said, for whatever reason, the population tag draw is a different level of science than what maybe that perceived anecdote is of that person talking about it. So there's always a
Mhm.
disconnect there. So talk about I'm super interested in these goat counts, and I definitely need to figure out a way to get on one. I think some of the dead nuts guys are going to be getting on a couple of these. What's a goat survey look like? Like how do you find them? Get involved with them if you're a listener, and then also like walk us through a day in the life of going on a goat count with you guys.
Yeah, no doubt. So the best way to keep up to date with all the goat counts that are going on is to become a member of the Goat Alliance. So we send out an email to all our members, and that's just a way to sort of give a preference to the people that are, involved with us. And we sort of have an idea each year of the goat counts that we're going to do, but we don't exactly know the date until we connect with that biologist and they say, okay, our schedule's good. This is the week. Let's do it. So that you just want to keep an eye on our socials and on our email, on our newsletter and that kind of a thing. It depends on the count. Some are larger than others. Glacier National Park, for example, only takes 8 people. So that one basically fills up before we even send it out to the public. It hardly ever gets out to the public. But in Montana, there, some of our first counts were in Montana. That's really where we sort of started out. So now what happens is we'll do one in the Bridgers or the Henrys and sort of rotate those ranges. But a lot of times they'll do sort of a, pizza and pop type of a deal with the biologist on a Friday. And then they'll send folks out to their particular region and area on a Saturday. And depending on the skill level or comfort level of those volunteers, you might just go do a day hike to a valley and you're looking at this one area for a period of time. If you're ready to go a little deeper, then they'll send you out and you can do an overnight and count, that way a little further in. And what's really interesting about this is that we have had our goat counts impact the amount of tags that you can have in particular units. So now look, that's happened both ways. At times it's added tags and at times it's lowered tags.
Hmm.
But that's how it goes. That's part of the process. So yeah, that's typically what someone, would experience. And I know that we have them this year. I mentioned Montana, we've got them in Washington. I'm not sure when this podcast is going to come out, but I know Nevada is doing one similar here in the next couple weeks. And then same, there's another one in British Columbia that's in the next few weeks, but I'll have to get you that information. So we do them all over the place, and I'd love to do more. People.
Yeah. That's pretty incredible. So you guys, is it so you, again, I'll keep bringing Montana. That's where I got the most experience in terms of
Yeah.
mountain goat country. So I know, they have Montana breaks everything down into regions, for every species of animal. So you have to apply for a specific region. And every year we were stationed in Great Falls. So I would always apply for the Highwoods mountain tag or mountain
Okay.
goat tag. And then they also have, oh shoot, I'm gonna forget now. Anyway, there's another there's a butte basically that's a little bit further east of the Highwood Range, and it's just you can see almost 360 degrees around it from one highway. So it's just this
Mhm.
one uprise, middle of
Uh,
nowhere, and it has a mountain goat tag that you can draw too. So like, do you guys, you mentioned the Bridgers and the Henrys. Do you guys just specifically focus on like bigger areas where you're probably gonna have bigger populations, and that affects the statewide impact, or do you guys like go out and count in each individual like region, for example, where you might, I can't imagine this place you can draw, it's like a what, 0.05% chance or something you're going to draw
mhm.
that tag, but there's obviously a mountain goat there, was. So you might be able to go chase, in my mind, a very small group of mountain goats versus, a handful. But like, do you guys affect the entire population count or?
So it's really where the biologist needs us.
Okay.
The biologist in the area that I mentioned in Montana has been a big proponent of citizen science for years, and so she's sort of been a leader in that space. So we naturally have done counts in that area because it's so helpful to her. There's
Okay.
other, I just got a call actually about doing one in another section of Montana. So maybe we'll be able to do that. It's really more about where the biologists need us and whether they think that that count can be helpful to the challenges of that herd, in that place. If there's like a disease issue, it's a count is not going to be as helpful as them getting out and actually getting funding to go do mortality studies or to do some collaring and that kind of a thing. So it depends on the unit and the biologist and what they need.
Okay. Yeah, very cool, man. Yeah, because there's several places you can go, but it's kind of a broken up thing too. It's not like
Right.
statewide where every part of the state's broken up into a section for mountain goat. It's pockets, and then obviously you get the
Mhm.
Bridgers and the Rockies and places out there like that that kind of have multiple zones. But that's pretty neat, man. That's really exciting. Now, have you ever? I'm assuming you've been on a couple of these, and like, what was your favorite part about being on one just personally? Is it going into a new country? Is it seeing the goats themselves? Like, how do you
Yeah.
feel when you're out there?
Yeah, good question. So I have not hunted for mountain goats. I've not drawn a tag, but I did photograph a hunt a couple years ago in British Columbia, which was fantastic. I went with a board member of ours that he's been on more goat kills probably than I've been on whitetail hunts, I would say. So anyway, he's a great guy, and there was a solid crew there, and we went to two different locations. The first location, basically, we saw goats up top, but we just couldn't get to them. The goats like to follow the snow line down the mountain, and it was still rainy and wet. So, as most hunts in coastal British Columbia are, if you're not familiar. And so we just couldn't get to them. So we had to back out and go to another spot that was in a different location. And we did start to get some snow, and that sort of helped us to meet them at a good spot. So yeah, it was a fantastic experience. The two of the hunters did get goats, which was awesome to sort of
Oh,
be in on
wow.
that, and
Yeah.
it was a pretty special experience. You know, that hunt for me, my hunting experience out west, gosh, is it my I want to say eighth or ninth year now going out west to, the first few years I was doing archery. And then once I switched to doing my photography business, there were no tags for me for a while, Aaron. I can finally start applying again now. But so then I did photography for years, chasing elk out west, which I'll do again this fall. Um, and so that experience now is when I compare it to the goat hunt. Um, the goat hunt's just another level. There was
Mhm.
certainly like a moment where I had to sort of have a conversation and calm myself down. And, it's one of those things where you're in it in the moment and then you look back and you're like, oh, well, now I feel super confident and I want to go on more goat hunts. Because
For sure.
once you get out there and you realize, it's like anything else. If you're not pushing your edges, you're not really growing, right? And one of
Yeah.
the things I love about mountain goat conservation is yeah, we're conserving mountain goats and helping the hunting community and those of us that love the goats, but we're also conserving this sort of wildness, that this ability to go to places that are more challenging, and that relationship with nature is key for me. And so I think that that's a perfect example of why it's important to be involved in this work. So anyway, it was really cool. And actually, the goat that one of the guys ended up getting, when you hunt with someone, Aaron, you sort of have, you got secret symbols with your hand or your eyes, or I mean, it's just like you get to know somebody. So the guy that
Yeah.
I'm out west with to hunt elk, we can just kind of look at each other and we know like what we're gonna do, right? We just know where people are gonna go. And this hunter and I, we didn't have that. And so he was sort of looking off, like glassing off this ridge. And I was looking at him down the ridge, and up comes this goat, you know. And I'm sort of, as a photographer, I have my priorities are the safety of the hunt, right? I don't want to get in the way of anyone shooting. The hunt comes before the photo. So when an animal's looking at me, I mean, I am in, whitetail tree stand freeze mode. And so all I was doing was just moving my eyeballs. This goat's looking at me, and I'm kind of, nodding. I don't know if people can see on the video, but you're giving like these kind of half quick nods, like trying to get someone to look. And he's kind of looking at me like, "What are you talking about, man?" And finally he sees the goat, and I mean, it must have been, I don't know, 15 yards from me. And
Holy cow.
so then it comes around, and he gets a shot at it. But it was, yeah, it was funny. I couldn't figure out what language to speak to him there, but it was a cool encounter. Yeah.
That's incredible, dude. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think that's probably very common in any hunt, getting an animal 15 yards, especially big open terrain or cliffs and a mountain goat. But we had the first ever like real encounter I ever had with one was in Glacier, actually. So that's cool. You
Mhm.
guys do counts up there.
Yeah.
Took my brother up there. He came up to visit us a couple of times while we were in Montana over the summers, and we went up to Glacier, did the going to the Sun Road, and we hiked this. I don't remember what the trail is, but anyway, you park in the parking lot there at the top, and you can take this hike that's basically across one of these more open cliffs at the end of the day. So like you said, you get that. It's probably not even close to what you get in real mountain goat country, but like it feels like that because you're looking, I don't
Mm.
know, 1,000 feet down at the highway below you, and you're
Mhm.
walking this little goat path kind of thing. And we turned around because my wife had gotten just about as far as she wanted to go comfortably, and it was getting a little bit more narrow and stuff. And my brother's like a daredevil, so he's way ahead of us. So we call him back, and we're sitting down there waiting on my brother to get back. And we turn around, and there's a mountain goat walking the path at us, and we're like,
Yeah.
"Where'd this guy come from?" First of all, and then but also like, "Holy crap, this is going to happen." And so we literally all had to. He wasn't going to stop, or she. We'll get into that here in a second too.
Uh-huh.
And there's not enough room for us and that goat there. So we kind of like look around in this little spot in the like rock face wall behind us. We just all bellied up or backed up to it as tight as we could, sucked in, and all three of us had our phones out. And this thing just walked right on by. Like you
Oh,
could have
that's
grabbed it
wild.
if you
That's
wanted to.
wild.
It was so crazy. So I'll have to dig up that video and see if I can link it in a post we do for this or something. But yeah, it was
Yeah.
one of the craziest things and just not a care in the world. This is his terrain and you're just in it.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah, they're
That's
not
neat.
as used to, I mean, there's places where they get habituated to people, which, we can talk about that. That can be a challenge, particularly because they're attracted to urine and the salts in the urine. And so,
Oh, okay.
if you're in the back country and there is a toilet or something, please use that. But anyway, they're not like the elk that are used to seeing you all the time. They're seeing hunters, and so yeah, I think sometimes more the challenge for the goats is that terrain as opposed to, sort of their own behavior, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, that's pretty wild, and to be that close, amazing.
Oh, dude, it was. I mean, you could have, if you wanted to hunt it, you could have just kicked it off the cliff. It
Yeah,
was that
yeah.
close. It's
Wow.
nuts.
Huh.
But as far as Billy versus Nanny. So that's something, I watch a ton of hunting YouTube, and a lot of times I'll end up surfing across if I can find a new mountain goat hunt to watch. I just love watching the hunting, and like you said, the adventure that's behind it, and everybody's story it's a story, man, because like it's like a once
Yeah.
in a lifetime thing maybe. But the thing that always comes up is Billy versus Nanny, and maybe they don't shoot because they're not sure. Maybe they get one and it maybe wasn't what they thought it was. Do
Mhm.
you have any like I'll call it quote unquote easy tips to like generally judge? Because unless I see the little kids with them in places I've like, let's say Montana glassed them or something, the kids are always hanging out with a nanny probably. But as
Mhm.
far as in a group of adults, like how do you tell?
Yeah, yeah, good question. So there's a few ways that we sort of um, there's a few ways I like to explain that, right? So, if the goat is with a kid, then it's probably a nanny. Don't mess with it. That
Right.
one's pretty easy, right?
Yeah.
So there's a few other things to look at. One is the on the horns. A female's horns are generally going to be a little thinner, and they're going to have more of a hook on the end of them. Whereas a male, a billy, is going to have a very smooth curve, and they're going to be a little thicker. And a good way to tell the thickness of a horn is by looking at the eye right below the horn. So if the base of the horn is wider than the eye, that's sort of that's leaning, billy. So you think, okay, this could be a male here.
Okay.
And then also that little hook, and you'd have to see them side by side, but as they grow older,
Yeah.
it's easier to tell the difference. Um, another thing is during the rut, the males are going to get a bunch of sort of dirt and mud on their back flanks, on their sides, from sort of messing around, and that's another way that you can tell. The mature males are also going to get that long sort of what you might call a Roman nose, like a horse kind of a look, which is
Hmm.
pretty unique to the goats. And when you see an old photo or mount or painting of a mountain goat, that's sort of the characteristic face that we all kind of think about. Uh,
Yeah.
the best way to tell, oh, and then also males are more likely to sort of be by themselves in an area that's kind of away from others. The best way to tell is to see them pee. So a female is going to pee like a female dog, just
Hmm.
squat down, and a male is going to pee like a quarter horse, just kind of stand up, lean forward a little bit. And so that's the key indicator if you can't pick up on some of the other things. And it's
Okay.
interesting. Like when I was on that hunt, I sort of had an idea of what the goat was that I saw, but I was looking at it for again probably 15, 20 seconds while I'm trying to communicate with this guy. So I had time really close to look at the goat. But these guys that have been hunting for years, they're able to tell right away. I mean, even when it was kind of moving, they're like, "Oh yeah, great male, go for it." So it's just one of those things that it takes a little time, and the more boxes you can tick off, the better.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of like Montana's got like a grizzly versus black bear like quiz you have to take to get certified to bear hunt out there.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing I liked about that is, it's kind of, if you've looked at enough bears, it feels like it might be really easy to tell, but they throw some really good pictures at you in there that you're really like, you do have to sit back and question a couple of things. Or like, man, is that, I think it's this, but I'm not sure. But like you said, being able to check multiple boxes of like, okay,
That's
it
right.
might not have this very distinct feature that normally is on a grizzly versus a black bear, but it's got these other three things that I can tell that probably lean in this direction. So you're
Yeah,
looking to compare as many variables as possible. And to your point, you're and in most hunts that I've watched on like YouTube and stuff too, like the guys are sitting there really like taking a long time to look at these
Mhm.
animals and probably just taking as much information as they can to really make the best judgment call.
Yeah, that's right. It's toughest with goats when it's a mature older female and sort of midlife younger male. That's
Mhm.
the overlap that's the most challenging. And the other thing I would say is when you're like hunting anything really, but particularly goats, you get your scope on them, you make a decision, this is a great goat. When you move through the mountains, everything looks different as you come to another ridge or another valley. So just have a
Yeah.
double check because what looks like that rock, from 300 yards away, when you get to 100 yards, it might be a totally different goat and different rock. So anyway, that's something to keep in mind too.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's not like looking across the, in Ohio maybe or Iowa where I grew up. It's not like looking across the cornfield where nothing really changes. By the time you get up to that wood line that you were looking at, it's like
Sure.
every little detail changes. You think you can pick out a tree until all of a sudden you get over there and you're like, wait a minute, where am I again? And you got to go almost find your glassing spot on the other side. And yeah, that's tough, man. That's really tough. And then goats, the places they live, like you said, you could probably have multiple goats you don't even see, and then get up there, and all of a sudden the one that you thought you were looking at turns into three. Maybe there was two others that
Yeah.
just were in a different crevice or something. That's nuts. Very cool, man. As far as do you have a favorite? You being an outdoor photographer, we'll get into that a little bit too, just to learn a little more.
Yeah.
What do you have a favorite thing to get after? And you don't have to say mountain goats. I know that's kind of what we're talking about today, but like, what's your favorite animal or species or even activities? We mentioned you go on filming hunts and things like that too. Is that you like doing that versus you've got some like sky and solar eclipse pictures and stuff behind you? Like, what's your favorite
Yeah.
type of photography or adventure to go on?
Yeah, yeah, good question. Well, I mean, I think in terms of adventure, I mean, I love the mountain hunting. I mean, I just love whether it's elk or goats. And elk in particular is, I think, the most fun you can have hunting. I just think when that bugle goes off, between that bugle and the time you're going to try and make a play on the animal is just one of the coolest moments in the outdoors. So I certainly love that space. I in the photography world, I do. As much landscape photography as anything. And a lot of that comes from those outings that I'm on. When I go with a hunter or an angler, my sort of goal there is to tell the entire experience. So yeah, of course, that's different trophy photos and the food and all that, but it's also the sunrise, it's the weather, it's the pain of the pack out and all that. So a lot of the images that I add to my fine art catalog, so to speak, are from those outings. And it's just amazing that all that all that focus around one particular animal or species brings about all these other beautiful scenes and experiences. And so that's one of the things I'd share with people who don't hunt is that the you're experiencing an entire ecosystem when you're hunting, and particularly if you've been into it for a while. Everyone can get lucky and have an animal come by them, and God willing, that all happens to us at some point. But usually, you have to sort of understand the terrain and the animal and all that to be able to get close enough, for a shot. So I certainly think it's something in the mountain hunting space, or at least being out there, relying on your backpack and that kind of a thing.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely challenges you in a whole different way. That's for sure. I remember getting out to again Montana. I grew up Midwest, and we were
Mhm.
in the Air Force together. We got stationed East Coast, so that's not a whole. It's a different ecosystem, like you said. But at the end of the day, the
Mhm.
hunting style isn't that much different than what you'd do in the Midwest growing up. And
Yeah.
and then you get to Montana and you go on your very first hunt, and you think you've got all this stuff you need, and you're like, what am I doing out here, dude? Like my clothes aren't right. This is way too hot. All the gear I've got, the
Yeah.
backpack isn't what I need. Like, and so you kind of revamp everything. So yeah, it's a whole different world. But the thing I fell in love with about Western hunting is just and every hunt is an adventure, and I never thought of it that way, but just that it's an adventure every time you go out because you have to rely a lot more on like taking in as much of the out surroundings as you possibly can because you're not stationary hunting. You're spotting something off, you're trying to get to it, or you got to navigate different terrain you maybe never been to before. And there's just always like a different level of like every hunt's different. It's not like I'm going to where I grew up, I'm going to the same tree stand. I generally know how the deer operate in this same area. It's still an adventure when you go out there and you're still kind of that anticipation that a big buck's going to come by or weighing weather conditions and this and that. But like the Western style is just a little bit different. You're
Mhm.
you're putting your body and your gear and everything else a little bit more to the test, I'd say, than just your willpower to stay put long enough for that animal to come by, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
definitely a lot more factors there.
I'm laughing. Our first trip out to the first time we went out west was to Idaho, and I mean, just everything wrong. Like our campsite was bad, our my boots were bad, my pack was bad. And you just kind of there was a guy there that took a little mercy on us and sort of helped us out and was teaching us ways to elk hunt. But yeah, we always joke and we carry on a few traditions from that first year, each year just to remind us of how far we've come.
Yeah, you don't know until you get there, kind of thing either. And
That's
you
right.
can have you see it all the time on social media, especially everybody. Oh, I got my first elk tag, or I got my first this or that. And what gear do I need? What boots do I need? And it's good that you're asking those questions because it is different. And and the gear talk is real. I think you can get a little too into it, but man, I would, yeah, if you're gonna give a tip, I guess just get whatever you're gonna get and use the crap out of it before you get out there. Probably would be a good answer.
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting new boots, spend the money, try on 2 or 3 pairs, get the one that fits, spend the money, and get at least 50 miles on them. I mean, that's kind of how
Yeah.
I like to um, and if you have that, then you know you won't get. Hopefully, your trip won't stop short for blisters.
Yeah, for sure. I think the feet are the one thing that would totally stop a hunt if it's your blisters, especially. But I got lucky with mine; they didn't move around too much when I first got my first set of. I think
Mm.
Crispies is what I've got, and
Okay. Yep.
they fit well, like you said. Get the ones that fit and everything. But man, just the stiff soles on them and kind of the way they really lock your ankles into place, which is good. They're probably overkill for a lot of the hunting I needed, but when you get in the mountains, it's nice.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, they definitely your feet will ache for a while because your bones just aren't used to working like that compared to your normal you know early season antelope. I'm using Morel hiking boots, and I've used those
Hmm.
for years everywhere I've hunted, and those my
Yeah.
feet
Yeah.
know what those feel like, But
Yeah.
so that's awesome, man. Well, as far as like the photo thing is interesting to me. So I got into the outdoor space when I was really young, and I kind of taught myself how to hunt. I grew up watching the hunting channel when we had cable TV, and that's really I don't know. I found it a TV. My grandpa had a bow hanging in his garage, and it kind of all clicked. And but then as I got a little older, like you're starting to watch these guys and the same shows on TV, and you start my mind was going like, oh, it'd be really cool to film my hunts one day. Like I really want to learn how to do that. So I've
Hmm.
always been on like the video side of things, and
Okay.
even my first jump into the outdoor career space was through a camera company, because that's just what I was into. But you're in the photography and telling stories with your photography. So talk about like on your website, and I forget what they're called, but you could kind of do like a photo book, I guess is what I'm going to call it, and you can tell
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
exactly what you call it there. But like it tells a story in pictures, and I the photos I was looking at are just awesome, and I love how you capture all the things that you capture. And I think there was one in there on a veterans looked like fly fishing trip that you
Hmm.
did that's on your website. Like, what's the difference to you? And then, if, is there a difference of, chasing something through a video lens and trying to capture these moments, video versus photo? And then, like, how do you put that together in a catalog for someone to take home?
Yeah, so I'll start with the videography, and that's an easy one because I don't do videography. And the reason I don't do that is it's sort of twofold. It's both directions, because I get this question a lot, and people are like, "Well, you're gonna film it?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not actually. I can bring a videographer,
Yeah,
certainly if you'd like that. But because I also do the writing, I'm already thinking about two things out there: the photos and the writing. And so. I just find that I've worked with videographers, on one of the fishing schools that was out here. I did photos and she was doing video, and um, you're just looking at different things and you're operating in a different way. And I also know myself that if I were to get into video, it wouldn't be long before I was carrying one of those like bazooka cinema cameras, and I just wouldn't. And then I think it would just take away from the photos. And the other part of my work. So that the easy answer is just sort of that's why the photography is what I focus on, and that's what I do. And then so I call the books on the website I call sporting magazines. I've had stuff published in Fly Fish Journal and Gray Sporting Journal, and that's great. They do a wonderful job, but it is very hard to take 8 photos and tell the story of a whole week, on the mountain.
yeah,
And so that's what I do with those books, and they're bespoke and custom to each outing, right? So I sort of think through the way I describe it is subject, scope, and scale is on sort of one axis. I'm sorry, it's subject, story is in the middle, and then scale is on one side. And then if that's on the x-axis, and then on the y-axis, you have story again in the middle, you have the individual and the community. And so I'm thinking about all these things. I want to take images that are specific to that individual on the outing. And then I also want to take images that you or I, having never been on that hunt, could also identify ourselves with. And then on the scope side of things, it's everything down to that, knife blade all the way out to the scenery and the landscape that I'm operating in. So I've sort of internalized that over the years, and that's how I've pulled all these different images together to be able to tell that story with with a certain rhythm. So that's what I think about when I'm out there with a client.
That's amazing, man. I love it. And on these photo magazines, so is that something unique to each client? Like, is that like a story specifically for them? They take it home with you or with them, or is that something that like because it's called a photo magazine? Is that something that's like published at the end of the day, kind of on your own website, and then anybody can get a hold of one of these and like read the story as it goes along?
Yep. So those are custom to each client. So, the idea is that you could have a collection of your own sort of photo books from your journeys to share with family and friends and leave on the coffee table. And, we always remember certain parts of the trip, but I find that even looking back as the photographer, I remember things on the trips that I had forgotten even a year or two ago. So those are specifically for the clients. But what I do is a lot of times I'll share images from those outings on my Substack. I have a Substack, it's called a Field Notes, and I write weekly on there, which is a mix of some fiction perspective, and then I do the photography stuff on there as well. So that's more of sort of, if you think of a magazine, it's more through that avenue on the Substack. And then, I write something called in a field journal, which is basically I use these little moleskin things, as a journal when I'm traveling or on an assignment. So I take photos and entries from that, and actually I'm doing the one for this year right now, and I combine those, and then that's available to everybody, so they can sort of get a highlight of everything that I've done in that year and just the different takeaways and different pieces that I've written in there. So I combine them a few different ways.
Very, very cool. And those are available on your website.
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. What's your website?
dkendrickc.com.
KendrickC.com. We'll have a link to that in the show notes too for people to go check out. And even if something you're into, great. If it's not, definitely go in and check it out. I didn't know you had those things in there, so I spent a
Oh,
lot of
good.
time
Yeah.
on your website the other day, cruising through some of those things, man. And it's incredible. I know I'll be getting a couple of those for myself because you hit it on the head with the coffee table thing, man. It's like if you have the opportunity, so you are a hunter, you're going on this really cool adventure. Maybe it's a once in a lifetime mountain goat hunt.
That's
Like,
right.
how do they get a hold of you so you can be that guy that can put one of these together for them?
That's right. Yeah. So the best way or the best places that I've seen this type of work apply is that once in a lifetime hunt or a hunt with a special person or group. And so if you have one of those coming up this fall, let me know. And it's really based on the scheduling, right? So there's only so many months of hunting season. So the sooner I know, the sooner I can sort of block it off for you. And then, we talk through logistics and the way that I operate, and I share some of the realities of my work, which is that whenever you bring an extra person on a hunt, it adds a challenge. There's no doubt. So the best way for me to mitigate that is to sort of keep those priorities in mind that I mentioned earlier, but also to become part of that hunt or fishing outing. I mean, if we're glassing, I'll get a few pictures and then I'll help glass. If we're around camp, I'll help around camp. I want to be part of that experience as much as I can, because anytime you have a camera on or a video camera too, it changes the dynamic in a particular way, and so I just try to minimize that the best that I can. So yeah, we just talk through everything and sort of what their vision and hope is for the hunt, and then we see if we can make it happen. And yeah,
Heck yeah,
my contact will be here, but it's on my website as well. So yeah, you can get a hold of me.
okay, awesome, fantastic. And yeah, you mentioned it there. Bringing the camera guy along, or if you're a solo hunter like myself, most of the time, and I bring camera gear along, it does change that dynamic. One of the things you said earlier, I had forgotten about, is you said the hunt comes before the photo, and that's so everything. If you watch hunting TV or watch YouTube, man, it's like you always hear that guy whisper, "Are you on him? Are you on him?" Like there's always like the camera comes before the hunt in most cases,
Yeah.
and sometimes people don't shoot or they're not successful maybe on the hunt because the camera got in the way, right? So like, how do you balance that of the hunt comes before the photo?
Yeah, well, the way that I like to describe it is sort of, I mean, it's a term that other photographers use in documentary photography, which is, you have to move without the ball. And so that doesn't mean that I get an over the shoulder shot every time. It just doesn't
Hmm.
happen. Because a lot of times you're walking through the woods or the mountains and you got to stop and freeze, and that shot's going to happen. And whatever's there, I got to get a photo of. But I do
Yep.
like to ask people, and so anyway, my point is, I'm gonna get thousands of photos on an outing like this, and I'm gonna end up with a couple hundred really good ones that I can share.
Hmm.
But so I'm gonna have enough. It's not like this photo book isn't gonna happen because I didn't get your kill shot, right?
Yeah.
But I do like to know from that client, like, well, what is your preference? If we're not in an ideal place, do you want something on the animal? Do you want you? Do you want it zoomed in? I can't always do that, but I like to know sort of what's important to people. But I will tell you that every book that has an animal in it certainly has a bigger impact than one that doesn't. So that's why I just, in the moment of truth, I do the best that I can, and I want them to get that animal down. So that's what everybody wants, and so that's why I prioritize it that way.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I think there's like I've never seen anybody do it like you do, I guess, and put these things together in these photo magazines and just looking at the examples you had online, it's almost like it's a whole different way of telling a story, but getting a chance to like stare at a photo that's a snapshot in time and then let your brain do the imagination work of everything else that happened. It just like sucks you back into that space and your brain is forced to almost just relive everything that happened anyway. It's like the pictures worth a thousand words type
Hmm.
thing, where a video, it almost, and I never thought about it this way until I was like looking at what you do. When you're watching a video of what happened, you're kind of limited almost, your brain is a little more limited on its imaginative capability if you weren't there, like you're just watching. Like your mind kind of is just, okay, the timeline of what the camera tells me happened is what happened versus those snapshots and stills in time. There's just it pulls at your heart a little more, I guess, if that makes sense. It really, my mind gets absorbed in it, and I'm a very imaginative type guy, I guess, but like it just feels like it sucks you in, and then it's like there's more wonder and kind of captivation there a little bit. I don't know how to just say that other than that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. I sort of think of it in a way of a couple ways. One is that I think that photos last longer than video, and what I mean by that is, when you first sit down and watch a video, it's awesome. You have a great time with it, and there's sort of diminishing returns each time I think you watch a video. I mean, think about it. Even a great movie, your favorite movie, the highest
Yeah,
end of any, of sort of any video production, or even like if you're talking wildlife, think about when Planet Earth first came out. Was it 20 years ago maybe, or something like that?
yeah.
So there's sort of that diminishing return, and I find with photos that they just last longer. And because you mentioned that really something really bright, I thought, which was, the photos make you use your imagination a little bit and sort of recall things in a different way. And so I think
Hmm.
there's a tremendous value there, and that having those photos and letting your mind kind of wander back into that space is different than you being fed that through a video. It doesn't mean that they're better or worse. I just think they're different. They're
Yeah,
presented in different ways. So
yeah.
I think those things last a lot. And when you look around people's houses, we don't have videos running on the walls or on the counters or on the fridge. We have photos. And
Hmm.
I think that reason is because what I call the anchor of photography is that this is not all photography, but I think it is photography in general, which is that this thing that we've taken a photo of actually happened. And I mean, of course, you can use cameras for other things,
Hmm.
so photography or studio work. But to me, that anchor is very important because I'm not out there with a brand creating an image to show off a rifle. Like, again, that's awesome. I'll do that work. But when it comes to this kind of photography for a private client, we're telling what actually happened. So I try to intervene as little as possible. And I think that authenticity, gets pulled through.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I guess the actual happen piece too. It's just a different way of telling that story because you come and video edit it, and I have several videos that I've put together that you just intentionally or sometimes out of necessity for time constraints or just maybe things that you're just like the audience maybe doesn't really need to know that or maybe something you just wanted to just say, kind of omit completely. Like the video factor, there is an editing piece that goes into it too. So you're picking what you can tell and putting it into a video as if that's the entirety of what happened versus like you said a photo. And even when you get to write about it, there's things I think if I had a because I used to write for some magazines too in the outdoor space, and I just thinking again, your what you do kind of brought me into that space of like if I had a bunch of photos and I was like telling that story written or even telling it like podcast form, I'd probably talk about or write things out, pieces of that story that happened that I wouldn't put into the video version from a bunch of different factors that could come up.
Mhm.
So yeah, definitely a different way of telling that story for sure, but maybe a more complete way. And it seems less complete if you think about it from just a snapshot in time, but it can be more complete
Yeah.
because of what it allows your mind to do in the creative part. And even as hunters, I think we all, humans, I think in general, but hunters especially, like the stories are what bring us together. And like being able to tell that story is a little bit different than show the story sometimes.
Yeah, well, for sure. And especially, I mean, if I walk into your house and see your elk mounted on the wall, I know what that means. I'm going to ask you about the story. I want to hear about it. But for most people, it's not going to have that impact for them, right? And
Hmm.
so, but if you show them that photo book and you're trying to learn about a family member or a friend, you really get to know somebody on a hunt, and to see those photos from it, I think it just it just adds more. What I say is, bring back more than a trophy. And I
Yeah.
think that's a way of sort of memorializing that.
Yeah, that's super cool, man. Do you have any specific outings that you've followed that just really tug on your heart, or like, man, that was one I'll never forget, or do they all kind of like that?
I appreciate them all, really. One, because I'm just blessed to be able to do this for work. I mean,
Yeah,
it's really cool that it's worked out for me. Because, like anybody, anytime you change jobs or careers, and I did this when we were just having our first kid, and COVID was happening, and the world was falling apart essentially.
perfect timing.
So I appreciate them all, in that sense. But I do like I like doing stuff that's new and a little different. And I was down when I was first getting going. I was down in Mexico to do some photograph some flats fishing. So there's a local lodge here, called Covered Bridge Outfitters and Lodge, that essentially offers the best of Northeast Ohio. So steelhead fishing, walleye. They do turkey. They do ducks. They do it all. Deer.
Very
And
cool.
so every once in a while, that when they do hosted trips, I'll go with them. And I do get hired by guides and outfitters as well to provide for their best clients or that kind of a thing too. So going to those new places is cool. But man, the mountains.
Yeah, you got a special place in your heart. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Very cool, man. Well, jumping back into to RMGA a little bit, what do these guys? You mentioned they do the fundraising, do raffles, things like that. Do you guys have what I would call more traditional like banquets, or do you guys do everything virtually? Like, how do you guys operate on the fundraising side?
Yeah, so because we cover such a large area, we don't have a specific, goat banquet. We do go to Sheep Show and have a booth there, and so that's kind of a big event and gathering, and we do some get-togethers there. And then we also have a regional rep program, which we're actually sort of in the process of reimagining and trying to make it a little more robust. So if anyone's interested in a more formal volunteer role with the Goat Alliance, please drop me a note. We're exploring this now. But that's sort of through those regional reps is how we might do like a pint night, for example, have a biologist speak and give some stuff away and raise some money that way. And then, yeah, the rest of it is going to be remote. So our online auction obviously is happening online. That's in the spring. And then our raffles that we're going to work on will be available digitally as well. And actually, I just heard that Nevada, so Sheep Show is in Nevada, in Reno, and they just sort of changed, I think, some of their rules around groups doing raffles. And so we need to figure that out. But generally, it's not just us. Other people will do things at that event too. So yeah, there's a few ways to get involved, and then every once in a while, if there's a really special project, we'll do a specific crowdfunding for that project. There's one in Alberta that's called Caw Ridge. It's the longest running mountain goat study in the world.
Oh,
And
wow.
they just need basic things. They need new ATVs to get to their research facility. They need new glass and tripods. And so we might do a campaign that's specifically for them, like we did last year, to try and help out with that. So yeah, those are sort of the different options, along with sponsors and life members and annual members and things.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome, man. So definitely a little bit less, I'd call it traditional, maybe from what most of the listeners are probably used to, like an NWTF or Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation or something. But still sounds like opportunities maybe getting reimagined for the regional things. That sounds pretty cool on the like the local level. Do you think so? As far as like mountain goats in particular, obviously you guys are doing a lot of research studies and things. You research that you guys help out with pulls into maybe more tags, less tags based off populations. What would you guys say is like what's the biggest threat to mountain goats in general? I know some places are getting reintroduced, other places are getting newly introduced, into population. So obviously they're able to kind of establish themselves in certain areas. But I
Mhm.
know one of the things that gets talked about a lot with like sheep, for example, is different diseases they can get from non-wild sheep and things like that. So like, what threatens a mountain goat population other than just the crazy places that they live?
Yeah, yeah, no kidding. Well, real quick on the disease, I was actually just speaking to someone about this. So MOV is the big issue for sheep. So
Mhm.
goats can get that, I'm told, and it can impact their recruitment. Actually, this biologist was mentioning to me that they even saw a difference once that goat who they thought was the carrier, when he died, the herd grew and started to have more kids again.
Hmm.
So it does impact goats, but not to the extent of wild sheep, so far as we can tell. So
Okay.
it's definitely something to look at and be aware of, particularly when there's overlap between sheep and goats. But it's not as big of a death knell for goats as it is for sheep, so far. And goats are interesting in the sense that it's hard to make a generalization about threats to mountain goats because their range is so large. So, something facing a coastal goat in British Columbia is much different than what's facing, a herd in Colorado or Montana or even Washington. It's just that. So we really look at these sort of, you can think of them as hunting units, but they're called oh, why can I not think of this term? Basically, I'll think of it, but it's a population unit. So that's
Hmm.
where we really look to see how they're doing. And so that's going to depend on what the threat is. In one area, it could be a new ski resort and a lot of helicopter traffic. In another
Hmm.
area, it could be that a certain predator has gotten in there. Maybe a lion has found this herd that they can access it. The goats aren't used to the lion, so it's going to have an easier time hunting them than in other locations. The other thing is that goats are, because they're an alpine species, if as our climate changes, then they're going to have a harder time going from place to place just because that habitat is shrinking. If you imagine shrinking the land up, if the tree species and the alpine zone is sort of going higher up the mountain, then that's sort of shrinking their area.
Hmm.
So, we have to keep an eye on that sort of thing in different areas as well. But they also have a pretty tough life. We have one person on the Science and Conservation Committee that studies avalanche death in goats.
Oh yeah.
And they have to be very careful with their temperature. That's another thing. If we get harsher winters, sometimes that can be challenging because the snowpack is so thick. But then if the summers are hotter, they don't have the snow to sort of sit on and cool down. So there's a variety of factors, right? There's not sort of one thing that's attacking goats all over the place, but there's usually one or two things with each population that we have to keep an eye out for. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, that's interesting. So it isn't, again, kind of bringing it back to some other species. It's easier maybe to. There's usually a culmination of factors, but because their habitat is fairly similar spread across the country, it's you can kind of target it in more. But yeah, where mountain goats live is totally different than where else, in each place they live is
Yeah.
very very unique. Even though it kind of seems similar, the top of a mountain, but that looks so different compared to like you said, British Columbia versus Montana versus Washington or something. That's crazy. I never thought about like how unique that ecosystem is specific to where it's at. So
Yeah. Yeah. And keep in mind too, I know I mentioned this earlier, but there really is this, I say data gap, but we really don't have as much information on mountain goats as we need to be able to make the best wildlife management decisions. So I try to be really careful and speak a little more general on some of these topics because we have ideas of how these things are impacted in specific areas, some more so than others. If the herd's well
Yeah.
studied, then we know, but a lot of times we don't have that hard science to be able to say, oh, this is definitely the impact for this area. And so that's why I think fundraising for this is so important because we have to understand what the challenge is. We can't just assume, oh, it's this issue and it's not this.
Yeah.
So that's why we really try and fund those researchers to be able to get that information to make the best decisions.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And then where can everybody go as far as Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance goes? Where can they go to learn more about the organization, get involved, buy a membership, all the things?
Yeah, yeah. You can go to goatalliance.org. You can also follow us on Instagram or Facebook. And that's sort of the best way. Certainly our Instagram, I think, is our most active in terms of social. We have a few different membership levels. So we have the annual membership and the life membership. And then we also have sort of a subscription model we just started this year. So
Mm.
you can do a monthly giving through that as well. And we have a cool suite of sponsors that have helped us out get some digital discounts for things and that. So yeah, there's a few options on the website there, and you can honestly just drop me a note, and I'll connect you to the right place or talk you through a few different options.
Very cool. Awesome, man. So yeah, definitely check that out and become a member if you're not. It obviously goes to some really cool stuff, and it sounds like it's the first chance for those of you listening. Glacier is one of the most visited places in the world. So if you want to get in on that 8-person goat count, you probably want to be a member first
That's
to
right. Yeah,
hear about it first.
I haven't been able to go on that one, so I got to make that happen sometime. But yeah, that's definitely the way to do it. And yeah, and the other thing is, if you have a community that really wants to do it, let me know, and maybe we can make it happen. And we need three things for a goat count. We need the volunteers, we need a sponsor, and we need the local biologist. So we line up all those sometimes. Sometimes we just do one of those. It just depends on the area.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. Then great call out there. Yeah. So if you're a company listening, we've got some people that work in or own various companies. I know that listen to the podcast here. So yeah, if you're a company that wants to sponsor RMGA, get a hold of Kendrick and you'll be the guy that kind of helps them work through what fits. But I know, like you said, there's different partnerships where you can actually sponsor a goat count, which
Yeah.
super cool. And Dead Nuts has a couple employees that'll be going on some of these things that just really exciting stuff, but a cool way to get involved and really get give your people an opportunity in a way too to kind of get your hands dirty with something
Yeah, yeah, that's great. No,
or
that's
hiking boots
definitely the way to
dirty, I
do it.
guess, in this case. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, one thing I never let a guest get away with out here, and you've shared a ton kind of storytelling, but we'll never let you get out of here without sharing your favorite hunting story that you've got. And it sounds like, I was kind of curious if you maybe have been on a goat hunt, which you definitely have with the photography side. But if
Mhm.
you want to share multiple stories, great. You can share your favorite goat hunt you've been a part of. But also, I definitely need to hear an elk hunting story from you because it sounds like that's kind of where your heart sits.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's each one is special, sort of in its own way that the hunts that I've photographed. I did when I had my bow. I had a missed shot like early, one of those first couple years, and then I switched the camera. So I'm very anxious to go back out with a bow. I have some unfinished
Yeah.
business. Um, I think that first elk that my hunting partner got when we got that one was just really special because we weren't doing guides or anything. We typically don't do guides. And so to DIY an elk from a couple guys from Ohio to just figure it out, was really cool. And I'll never forget that. One of the things I love about elk hunting is sort of game planning for the elk. It's like, okay, well, we know they're here. We got this valley, our wind can go down this way. So we're going to just sacrifice this valley and we're going to go up this way and go make a play on it. And so when that finally all came together, it was really cool. I also just received a text. Sometimes it happens, the best stories happen after the animal is down. My buddy just texted me. It's been really hot here. It was, like 90, 91, 92 last week. And he texted me a reminder and just said, never forget that we packed an elk out in 94 degrees. And he killed this elk. Basically, we went all the way down to the bottom of this valley and sat by water. And then we were waiting for the wind to shift. And then we hunted up. and he killed this elk, maybe, I don't know, maybe 4 o'clock, early evening. And so we had the first lap was out in the dark, and then we came back and we hung all the meat and came back the next day. Um, and so it was blazing hot that day. It was so hot that I couldn't even eat a honey stinger. Like I was so dehydrated that it was just like gravel in my mouth. But I had actually, two things were going on bizarrely for that pack out. One was that my boots I had sent to get resold and they didn't come back in time. So I was
Oh
running
no.
this other pair of boots, which were fine, but they were definitely not ideal. Um, and then I had had my gallbladder removed actually a month before that.
Oh,
So, a month
jeez.
before this, normally I go into elk season in pretty decent shape, but a month before that, I was walking around my neighborhood like hunched over, kind of like neighbors like don't know who this weird guy is, like, and so I was not in the best shape, and combined with that heat, and it was because we had it in the bottom, even though we were leapfrogging a little bit, it was still just uphill all the way back to camp because it was, you could only exit that way on the public. So I just think that brutal pack out sticks out to me. Yeah.
Yeah, man. So it was 94 degrees when you guys killed him. Did you guys take it? You said you hung it overnight and went back in to get it?
Yeah, yeah. We hung it in like a little tiny little creek bottom near where the elk went down, and then got one lap out that night, and then came back in the morning to do another lap of meat, and then he took the head out too.
Very cool, man. How far was the pack out? Like one way?
I think it was 4 miles, maybe from that bottom up to where we could maybe get the UTV to, something like that.
4 miles one way.
Yeah.
That's nuts, man. You guys were way back in there.
We were that's where they were,
Yeah, you got to be where the
Yeah.
elk are. That's yeah, elk are where they are. That's rule
I
number
mean,
one of.
you're getting me thinking now too. I can think of that first year we went. Um, I was on this sort of scrubby slope, and this elk he was just all over it, and we were bugling again. Bugling, probably didn't know how we were bugling then. He was interested, and he ran full speed through this brush, and I just remember hearing trees crack and sticks break, and it's shaking. And I mean, he was 5 yards from me when he stopped. I was behind a pine tree. So on one head, I had his like snout sticking out one side and his butt sticking out the other. And I'm just waiting for him to take one step so that I can
Yeah.
get a shot. And he turned inside out and went exactly the direct opposite way. And but that was just, I immediately hooked, after
Oh
that.
yeah. You get close to one. That's all it takes. You're just have it work out once where you get to even see them, like after you've been calling and stuff. I think that's
Yeah.
what it takes for elk hunters. Like there's, you can't argue. Like you get out there, the adrenaline's going, you're excited, you hear the bugles, that locks you in on one level. But then when you get into elk, that's a whole nother thing. Because then it's like, yeah, it's crazy. The first elk hunt that I had, where I saw elk was like kind of a similar thing. We'd heard this bugle. It sounded like it was way off, like maybe the next ridge over even. Um, and we're kind of up on top of the ridge, up from camp, and it was almost noon, and we're like, well, the wind's gonna be switching. Let's um, we'll probably head down to camp, come back up in the evening, and try again type thing.
Mhm.
And this bull just kept bugling somewhere. We're sitting there kind of just talking. Took our packs off, had some water, and because we were talking about going back down to camp, I took my bow off my sling and strapped it to my backpack, stood up, slung my pack over my shoulder, and I look up and I'm looking right past my buddy's head. And 60 yards behind him, there's about a 320-inch bull standing there 60 yards in the timber. And
Yeah.
he's kind of like looking our direction. I think he must have heard my pack rustling around. And he sits there for a couple seconds. I was like, dude, don't move. I was like, there's a bull right behind you. And he's like, no way. And I go, no, seriously, don't move. There's a bull
Yeah. Yeah.
like 60 yards off. And he goes, what? And all of a sudden that bull lowers its head and it let out. I didn't know elk could like adjust their level of bugle.
Mm.
He lets out the softest bugle I've ever heard. And it was the one we were listening to. He was just in the trees, not that
Mhm.
far from us, ripping these soft little bugles. And anyway, he goes, "Was that him?" I go, "That was him, dude." And so he starts shaking. And I'm
Yeah.
shaking because I've never seen an elk in person.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
heard them and this and that. And anyway, the bull comes walking out because he had his cow call in his mouth and he rips a little cow call. And he
Mhm.
comes walking out of the timber, walks up to about 40 yards, does the exact same thing you said. He comes in, stops where if I would have had my bow on me, I could have shot him. But where just the difference in how my buddy was standing versus me, I said, go ahead and turn around. His head's behind a tree. He turns around. There was one limb from that cedar that came out across it, just right across his rib cage. I'm like,
Yeah.
can you get a shot? He's like, dude, I don't think I can. How far is it? And I range it, and it's like 37 yards. He's like, I don't think so, man. If he was closer, maybe I'd try. I was like, no.
Yeah.
And same thing, he rips a bugle, but then about the time he just needed to take that one extra step, he did a just perfect turn vertical and walked straight away from the tree, and that was it.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I'll never forget that, man. The whole time, my knees were shaking like crazy, and I'm just staring at this thing's hind quarter, thinking,
Mhm.
camp's this way. He's facing that way. If he shoots him, he's going over that side of the mountain. We got to figure out how to get all of that up over this mountain and
Yeah.
back down the other side of the camp. It's a whole different game, man.
Yeah, no, and I think elk too is uniquely a team sport, so to speak, because you got to be able to get that meat out. And I
Yeah.
mean, we've run into people that are hunting elk solo out there from time to time, and I mean, all the respect in the world to them
Yeah.
for that effort. But there's a cool sort of camaraderie involved in it that I like, and it's just good to have the time there in the mountains. But that's cool,
Oh
man.
yeah.
Elk are wild.
Elk are wild, dude. And to do it 4 miles, I'm not dogging on you. 4 miles one direction is insane to me. And even you had a partner, which is awesome. So you guys get to go back and forth and do it. But like, I remember looking at a map before we moved to Montana when I learned we were going there.
Yep.
The Air Force sent us that email, said, you're going to Montana. And I about did a backflip because I'm like, this is going to be the best
I
four
bet.
years of my life, like
I bet.
But I remember I immediately subscribed to Onyx Maps and got on there, and I'm researching like all the stuff in Montana, and I remember just like marking all these spots based off all this information that I had in my head from watching YouTube and whatever,
Hmm.
and just thinking like you hear the distance that people go, like, oh, we were 10 miles in, we were this far, we were whatever, even a mile, 2 miles.
Yeah.
So all these spots in the map, I'm looking at the closest trailhead, and I can probably get to this clearing, and there's probably going to be elk here for water and food
Hmm.
and whatever, this, that, and the other, and reading the terrain. And I remember, I don't know how many spots I had on my map that were like 3 miles in, 5 miles in, whatever.
Hmm.
This is off the trail,
Yeah.
or even just where you could get the car to, and then hike a
Yeah.
trail to some places. And I remember the very first, so I didn't end up elk hunting the first year or two, and then I found a hunting partner because that was it. I never wanted to go solo because I just that what if factor. Like if I'm back there and I break my ankle, or if I'm back there and a bear
Sure.
attack
Sure.
happens, or God knows what, you want someone there. So a lot of that was between me and my wife. She's like, you're not going to go do any of that crazy stuff by yourself. Like you need to find
Yeah.
somebody. So I
Yeah.
ended up finding a hunting partner. And the very first time he took me out to go scout this location, we're going to go drop some game cams during the off season. And this one was 2.5 miles, I think, one way to get to the ridge that we wanted to put a couple cameras on.
Hmm.
And I remember getting like a mile in, maybe a mile and a half, and this was like it was straight down from the where we could park the car, and then it was straight
Sure.
up, and then you could kind of start hiking.
Yeah.
And that straight down and straight up was enough for me to go, I will never ever go more than like a mile is like about max. And then you have seen an elk once, and you're like, there's just like how do you? It's insane. So like you just hear all these distances, but to have a partner to go with, I think that's essential because yeah,
Yeah.
in the team sport is great, but man, it's a mile in the backcountry is totally different than what I think a lot of guys might think it is, than
Oh yeah.
compared to a
No, I
mile
mean,
on a flat terrain or anything.
there's no doubt. I mean, at this point now, when we're scouting to try and find the elk when we first get to these locations, I mean, we'll do 10 or 12 miles a day if we can't find them. But that's
Yeah.
different than doing a 10-mile pack out. I mean, sometimes, honestly,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still such a beginner to the mountain hunting thing because even though I've been going for 8 or 9 years, I go on one or two hunts a year. So I've gone on less than 20 hunts, let's say, if that makes sense out west where,
Yeah.
people
Yep.
that live there and are doing it, their comfort level is so much higher. And that experience level is so much higher. But I do sort of have to have the sniff test when someone's like, yeah, we packed them out 12 miles. And I'm like, did you really pack it out 12 miles? Like,
Right.
I mean, some of those people that they say it and you believe it. But then there's others that are like, they throw around 12 miles, a 12-mile
Yeah.
pack out for elk. And I'm like, okay.
Right.
I
Right. When
hope,
your legs have felt it,
I
you
hope
like
it's
you said, the
true,
sniff test.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly. I'm not going to call
yeah,
you out here, but
right,
man,
right.
my legs have felt even half of that. And I don't know if that's true right now. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's That's crazy. Cause I remember the first time too, I was just coulee hunting for deer, and well, even the very first hunt I did, my wife was the first one to break the ice out in Montana. So we got her first deer there, ended up getting a whitetail doe. And I asked her, because I'd been watching all these videos, how do you quarter out an animal? I've never done that. I've always just, you gut them and you drag the whole thing to your
Yeah,
truck
sure.
and, whatever. And anyway, the first, I asked her if I could pack it out. She goes, I don't care. I've never done this before. I'm like, cool, we're going to, zip it up and quarter it out and
Right.
pack it out. And even that, like, that was a learning experience, because the first time you get weight on your back, and this was, there might have been 60 pounds ish of meat, and that we brought out the hide because she got it mounted too. But even that, like getting that first weight on your shoulders and feeling that, you're kind of like, okay, and this was a flat walk across a wheat field to the car, 250, maybe 300 yards from the car.
Hmm.
And just feeling that, and by the time you get there and you take that pack off and you kind of feel it in your knees a little bit, you're like, okay, this is different. Never done this before. And then the first mule deer I got, that one, I thought I did something, man. I went off got off the road, went down to these coulees, found this buck, hunted him, got him,
Hmm.
packed him up, and I was solo this time. So that buck probably had, my pack was probably pushing 75, 80 pounds, maybe a little heavier, all
Hmm.
said and done, again, cape and everything. And anyway, I start climbing up. The first time I had to deal with hills with that much weight on your pack, and then
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
muddy. And by the way, it was frozen when I walked in, and now the sun's beating on it, and it's like
Oh
getting all
yeah.
slushy and stuff. And yeah, I remember thinking, oh, I had to have done a mile today. And then I went in and did like the Onyx like route tracker of like how I did it. And it was like 780 yards. Like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
I've got some humbleness I got to figure out here.
No, no doubt, man. I get it. I mean, it's interesting too. We were talking about that first year. The first year when I went out there, we were basically doing like workouts that we used to do when we were playing sports, and we're like, yeah, we're ready for this. And you know, I mean, now it's different. I mean, I do I'll do some mountain tough sort of body weight stuff, and I run, and then I just ruck to get the body used to it and having that weight. And so even the way I train is different now. But at the end of the day, it's the appeal to this stuff is that it is a mental game, and you got to put one foot in front of the other over and over, and you just got to stay in that space, and embrace it. You got to just keep going forward. So I think, yeah, that sort of, you get stronger as you go, but also mentally, you just realize, okay, I'm just gonna have to do this. There's no other way to get this meat out.
No, that's a great point too. And yeah, there's a bigger mental challenge I think to it that maybe gets overlooked a lot. I think your body being able to do it is one thing, but your brain will make you quit. I feel like a long time before your body is actually going to quit on you. And the mountains are like just the mental adjustment of going from well, you're in Ohio, or me growing up in Iowa, and
Hmm.
200 yards is a long way in those places. You're thinking shot distances or whatever the case, but just the first time you get into the expanse of a mountain range, or even the openness of Montana, like the plain country out there, wheat country, and the coulee systems, and like it's just big. Like everything is big, and you look at something, you're like, oh, that's probably there. Well, it goes both ways. Sometimes you're like, oh, it's got to be a mile away, and you range it, it's like 500 yards, and you're like, oh. And then there's the other times of like, oh, that's probably 100, and you range it, and it's like 780 yards. You're like, what the heck? Like it
Right.
takes a while to just mentally adjust, but then the big factor I think is like it's intimidating. And then like you said, something might look like a challenge you can tackle, and then you get halfway through it and you're like, what am I doing with my life right now? Or whatever. So it's a brain factor just as much as anything else. So yeah, I guess maybe there's I don't know, 75 hard or any other brain mental toughness challenge you can take might be worth even doing on top of the physical before you
Yeah,
go.
that's it.
Just
What's 75 hard? I haven't heard of that. Is that
yeah, so
a thing or
yeah, 75 hard's like it's the world's greatest mental toughness challenge is what it
okay?
is. And Andy Frisella is the guy. He owns First Form supplements and a couple other businesses. But anyway, he put together this mental challenge, and I heard about it from one of my wife's friends out in Montana who was doing it. But
Okay.
basically, it's the equivalent of it gets looked at like a physical challenge, because the basic breakdown is you got to do 75 days straight, no alcohol. You got to drink a
Hmm.
gallon of water a day. You have to do two 45-minute workouts a day. And then you got to read 10 pages of a book. And I might be missing something on the first. So the first
Okay.
75 days
So
is
it's
that, right?
more of a like a holistic discipline thing.
It's a discipline thing, exactly. So
Yeah.
that's what he created it for, is to, like, you're going through something hard and you're just kind of on the rocks with a lot of stuff. Like, just put yourself through a program that's going to force you to be disciplined throughout your day to make sure you accomplish these things.
Hmm.
And when you kind of do it for a little bit, it's actually like, you're like, it doesn't seem that hard, because it can be, oh, and you got to follow a diet too, like a healthy, like,
Hmm.
eat right type diet too. But it's exactly that. It's 75 days to force you into a disciplined mindset. But for most people, it's like the mental stuff is what will get you. Like, you'll forget to do one of those things. Maybe you didn't drink that last glass of water and it's 11 p.m., or maybe you're like, forgot to get your second workout in, or maybe it's the 10 pages of reading. It's like, but you have to do it all, or you got to start back at day one. And then you got
Oh,
to do the 75 all over again. And
yeah.
then there's different phases to it. So, like, you do 75 days and then it stops, and then it becomes like the live hard program. And so then, uh, I think you can jump right into the next one, which is like phase one. And so they level it up. Now you have to take a cold shower on top of it, and you
Okay.
have to schedule like 5 critical tasks that you have to get done that day. Otherwise, the day's like a loss. So it could be anything. It could be work. It could be playing with your kids.
Hmm.
It could be whatever it is that you want to do to make yourself better. And then the next phase, you have to take an intentional 30-day break. So go have a beer with your buddies, go break your diet, eat a box of donuts, whatever it is,
Yeah.
break the chain, and then you get back into it. So it's a mental toughness thing is what it is. And I did it the first year because I needed it. It was just like a discipline thing for me, and getting back into working out again was a big helper for me for that. And I'm on my year 3 now, and I've actually just started. This will be year this will be year 3, actually. So I just started the 75 hard program a couple of days ago. So
Hmm.
you do basically, at the end of the day, if you do the whole program through its entirety, you're like 100. You're like half of a year you've followed this program in some
Okay,
capacity.
gotcha. Yep.
Yeah, so it's a mental toughness thing, but like, even doing that, it's like at the end of it, you kind of start realizing like it does help you mentally more than it does. It'll help you physically, which helps your mental, but it's like it really sharpens your mind on things and really helps you kind of stick to a plan and organize your time and a bunch of different other things that you get out of it. But most people look at it like, oh, 2 workouts a day and a gallon of water and I got to eat right. Like, it seems like it's a physical thing, but it turns out it's more of a mental deal. But I enjoy it. It's really cool.
Yeah, that's great. That sounds like an awesome program. And yeah, I think that those kind of things, they give you a certain confidence too. And I think we're all capable. I mean, I think that goat hunt's a good example for me and some of those early elk hunts, I mean, I think about how far we were going in when we first started, and now we don't really have a limit. We just go,
Yeah.
and so I think all that kind of work and discipline is it gives you a certain earned confidence that it's lasting and you carry it with you. So I think, yeah, that's a cool program.
Yeah, you do. And that's the crazy part, is like, I remember the first work meeting I was doing this program, and like at work meetings, like, typically everybody after the meeting, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, whatever it is, rolls around, work stops, everybody's cracking bourbon and this and that. And yeah, I was
Hmm.
remember like having this mental block in my head of like, I'm halfway through my 75 hard. Like, I don't want to break now because I'll have to start all the way at
Yeah.
the beginning. But like, how am I going to be this like social dude that's like not whatever? And I remember getting in there, and it wasn't nearly as weird as I thought it was. Like, no one
Hmm.
really even, I don't think anyone even asked about me drinking or anything. Like, oh, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
And then, so that was what mental hurdle I thought I was going to overcome. But I remember walking out, there was this new guy that was new to our team. That was the first time he'd met anybody. And he kind of pulled me aside. I can't remember what was going on. Anyway, pulled me aside, and he goes, man, there's just something about you. And I'm like, okay, like, I don't know you that well. Like, what do you mean? He goes, you just like walk in the room, dude. And he's like, you just got like this confidence or something. Like, what do you do to like do that? And I'm like, what are you talking about, man? Like, okay, I appreciate it. Like, cool compliment, but
Yeah.
like, and the only thing I can attribute it back to is a little bit of that. Like, you're walking in, and you've kind of just built this like little bit of an edge. You're doing something for yourself. You're gonna stay mentally driven on it and whatever. But apparently, like, people pick up on it too. Like, when, like you said, you build this confidence or whatever, and it's just there, and then it kind of sticks with you through everything you do in
Hmm.
your life. And apparently, people can notice it along the way. But you get in that backcountry, dude. The earned confidence factor is huge. And because even after that first, like that story I told you about going on that very first like 2.5 mile hike in and out with the set
Yeah.
cameras, like,
Yeah.
there is a little bit of a level, like, that was hard, way harder than I thought it was, but I did it. And now I know, and now my body knows, and my brain knows, like, okay, you can do that. And then, you run into your first, like, have you run into anything tough on the mountain that you've had to deal with?
Tough. Do you mean?
Well, like, tough, like, so the thing that popped in my head there. So when we went back to pull the cameras, like a month and a half, 2 months
Yeah.
later, my buddy, we've actually both brought, like, I think we did kind of like a mild test run because we were going to go back in there and camp, and we had like a week off work we're going to do like a 7 day elk hunt. That was the first time either one of us had really done that. So we're going to pack in. So we both brought like pieces of camp, and we didn't bring all of the stuff, like all the food and everything, but just to get the feel of the packs this time in
Yep.
there, we brought camp with us. And we get in there, and on the way out, there was like huckleberries were growing like crazy. And so we had actually stopped to pick huckleberries kind of on the way in, and we stopped to pick them on the way out.
Hmm.
Um, and on the way out, my buddy's out of nowhere, like he just kind of like dropped to his knees, and I was like, "The hell!" Like that was, I thought he got bit by a snake because it just like he had his hand down and stuff. All of a sudden, he like dropped and he's like kind of crippled himself, and I was like,
Yeah.
"You okay, man?" And he goes, "Oh, dude," he goes, "That was weird." And I said, "What?" He goes, "I feel like I just got struck by lightning." Like, what? He goes, "Yeah, dude, my back." And I was like, "Okay." And he's like, he's a little older than I am, but he's like super fit. I'm six
Hmm.
foot, 250 pounds. He's like 5'8", like a buck 60, like just man, just he's in shape, right? Every time we hunt, I'm like the guy that's
Uh-huh.
like, "You go ahead, I'll catch up. Like you're my goal right now while you go," kind of thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, he just drops out of nowhere. I'm like, that's not good. Out of the guy who's got to get out of here, and you're the guy who's like usually better shape. And anyway, so um, long story short, he just had some back spasm. I don't know if it's how he was bent over or twisted
Hmm.
and the hike in, maybe dehydrated. I'm not sure. But long story short, so I had to like carry his pack with my pack
Oh,
and like all
geez.
the
Yeah.
extra camp gear, plus like make sure like he was good because he had to like walking stick super slow
Yep.
out, and we
Yep.
just kind of like crawled out of there. But it worked out. But anyway, like something like that. Have you ever had like something that just was like unplanned that you had to like push through?
Yeah, I mean, well, the goat hunt's a great example. I mean, being from Ohio and doing elk hunting, I haven't had to take an ice axe anywhere before. So, we had one
Yeah.
stretch where, I had trekking pole in one hand and ice axe in the other, and kind of switching as you're zigzagging down. So, that was definitely, a stretch for me that, as I mentioned, was very challenging at the time, but now gives me a lot more confidence. And I'm like, oh, I know how to do that now. So it sort of opens up, I think more possibilities. But when you mention that, I actually think of something that happened in New Zealand. So when I was down there, I mentioned I wasn't hunting, but I was doing a ton of fly fishing and a lot of whitewater kayaking. And, we were paddling this river that I had paddled before, but it was at a different level. It was a little higher this time. So because I was familiar with the river, I felt like, okay, and this is a river that you got to walk in probably. You basically carry your kayak in for, I mean, I don't know, a couple hour and a half maybe.
Wow.
But to get up, to the put in and then you bring it down. And so we get on the river and I'm like, okay, I might have to walk a rapid or two, but I know the river, so I'm pretty sure I can get around it if I need to. And that's never a good sign when you're getting on on a river. I mean, this thing was it was just too high, certainly for me. And I got into this hole and was rolling and rolling, roll back up, and finally had to pull and swim. And I get basically you want to get out of the way of your boat. You don't want your boat behind you because it can hit you or pin you against something.
Hmm.
So I got to deal with that as I'm floating. I sort of get around my boat, and the boat floats on, and there's a massive rapid below me, and I somehow get to this rock in the middle of the river, and I'm like looking around, catching my breath, like, okay, what? Like, how am I gonna get out of this? I think I did I might have done a little video on at the time, actually, I got into photography because I started writing down there. Because I was trying to just communicate with my family and I did a blog and basically one of my buddies who's a photographer said, well, you should take a camera with you because when you send in your writing to magazines, if you have photos, they're more likely to publish it. So I was carrying around this little waterproof camera that I would just put in my fishing bag or my PFD.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, I think I even did a video about, seeing you guys on the other side type of deal. And it was like it was pretty intense because they basically the throwbags couldn't reach me. So these
Oh
guys
no.
they couldn't get to me. So basically what we ended up doing is I kept a spare sort of smaller throwbag in my vest. So a guy finally got out to me. We tied two tow ropes together, and then he ferried back, and then they sort of swung me across the river, as if you're like swinging a fly. basically. So, and then I had to do that again to get back to the other side of the river to get back down. And it was pretty wild because as I'm sitting in the car, just kind of, contemplating my life decisions, right? Um, I see this blue thing, and I'm not kidding you, in the middle of the river. And this had been a few hours, obviously. My kayak had somehow made it all the way down the river and beached itself right by where we had parked the cars. And I'm just like,
No way.
I mean, that was the last thing I wanted to see in my life was that kayak. But
Yeah.
I just knew that it was important to get back in it. And so the next day when we went out, I still had my boat, and it was I was very stressed and anxious, but by the end of the day, I'm like, okay, like I'm good now, and
Yeah.
but so I always sort of I'm grateful that the boat showed back up because I don't know that I would have gotten back into it, if I wouldn't have found it.
Yeah,
Anyway,
man.
not hunting or goat related, but that's the one that comes to my mind when you ask. Yeah.
Get back on the horse. No, and one of the things I like to ask guests too is to leave us with something good, man. So anything you want to encourage, whether it's conservation related or whatever, but sounds like get back in the kayak might be the thing.
Get back in the boat. Yeah, yeah. That's probably a good thing. I like it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, it's yeah, do something you're uncomfortable with, and that's bringing it back to that 75 hard thing. The very last phase of it, phase three, I think they call it phase 3 or 4. But anyway,
Mhm.
one of the add-ons or the add-on that time is to have a 15-minute conversation with a random stranger every single day. And it's like, but it's to intentionally like exert yourself into this like uncomfortable space, and that's the intention of the cold shower every day is to
Mhm.
intentionally do something that you're not gonna like, and it's gonna be hard. And but getting back in the kayak after something crazy like that, I think that'd be tough for a lot of people. But that's it's a big part of life. Getting back there, and you actually said it earlier. I wrote it down. If you're not uncomfortable, if you're not pushing your limits, you're not pushing your edges, you're not really growing. And that's huge, man. I've become a big believer of that in the years. And for me, I think the very first time I really felt it was when I chose to join the Air Force, and you go off to basic training and whatever, and then
Mhm.
you end up like, just for me, I ended up like really thriving down there in terms of like leadership and earning a bunch of different awards and leadership things I just never knew about myself. But just because I was forced into this like position, I chose to do it, but you're still forced to be there. You're forced to
Mhm.
go through all the hard stuff, and it just brings things out of you that you didn't really know you had sometimes going through those tough things. And then it pretty much rings throughout every time I've gotten to a point where it's like, maybe I'm just mentally struggling with stuff or whatever. It's like, am I pushing? The thing I'll find myself asking because of that first experience with the military side was like,
Mhm.
am I doing anything to like push myself right now? And if the answer is no, I'll try to find a way to make something uncomfortable. Doing the podcast was a product of that, and jumping into that, thing. And that's kind of doing its own thing now, but just
Yeah.
doing something you're a little uncomfortable with definitely keeps you on the edge of your seat. But a lot of times you grow out of it, which is huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that growth sort of has two aspects too. I mean, there's the 75 hard is a good example. But you can anything that you're doing in that sort of discipline world, is helpful. But I also think it just helps you sort of figure out who you are or who I am. I mean, th- there's spaces in the outdoors that I'm just not interested in going. I'm not interested in being a big wall climber, mountaineer. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
I'm just not interested in that. And so,
Yeah.
um, there's always going to be that person that's sort of a step ahead of you or more comfortable in these different spaces. But it's also to know, like now I have two kids now, and I don't think I need to be paddling grade 4 whitewater. And I mean I haven't because there's nothing in
Yeah.
Ohio. I'd rather be hunting or fishing, but I think it's just good to know sort of those areas because then you can focus on the things you love. I think a lot about life is just saying no to things. And I think that's a lot to do with the photography and conservation work that I do. I mean, there's a lot of things we love to do and love to learn and all that, but I think you got to pick those things that are most sort of aligned with you, and
Hmm.
push forward in that space and know that there's really no end to it. And that's what's beautiful about hunting and fishing and photography is that you could do it a whole lifetime and you're not going to master it. So it's just a question of, progressing each time you go out and getting better. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, 100%, man. And yeah, it's saying that's a tough thing too sometimes, saying no to stuff. But I think bringing it to where you said it teaches you who you are. I don't know how, I think it's hard with how much distraction we have in life right now to understand all the time who we are. And we just get pulled in so many directions and we don't have a lot of time to like soul search. And I think being outdoors is a great way to do that. And just having honest, quiet time is like a great way to do it. And then inevitably you're going to put yourself in some situations where you got to figure things out on your own or whatever the case is out there. And yeah, definitely teaches you a lot about who you are. And then I think you got to know who you are to be able to say no to some of the other things that might pull you from some of that stuff too. So that's huge. That's a lesson I had to learn,
Yeah,
is being able to
know
figure out what to
thyself.
say no to. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's key. I wanted to ask you too when you were asking about it might be both of those things when your colleague pulled you aside to ask about your energy or your presence. Do you think the praying side of your praying and slaying has to do with that? Because I think in my experience, it probably does.
Yeah. I would, I hadn't thought about that, but I would say so. And then one of the, probably where a lot of that comes from. So that's the anybody's faith journey. I think a lot of times it's easy to, for me, I know in particular, but I think it's probably a bigger thing more people can relate to is the ebbs and flows of it. Like,
Hmm.
so there's a lot of times where you just get caught up in whatever it is and you get pulled, you feel like your kind of faith takes a backseat or whatever. And in this case, doing 75 hard for that first time, one of the books I picked up, which for me, I added it to the books. It was you're supposed to read like a professional growth book or personal growth book, right? As
Hmm.
part of that program. But I'm like, you know what, I really also need to do is pick up the Bible and dive deep in that and just, I my faith journey, I guess, coming from a little kid, it was something that was just kind of always ingrained in me. I grew up, my grandparents went to church, my parents took us to the church, and like,
Hmm.
just never really a question in my mind. It was always just something that was there. But I was like, as I got older and you get into like middle school and whatever, and you get in these like youth groups and things like that, like I felt like I was kind of the kid that took it a little bit more serious. Like you want to fit in with everybody, but like you also know, like I'm really into what this guy's talking about today, and everybody else is kind of there to rub elbows with their buddies and
Hmm.
whatever, and just kind of notice those little things here and there. But then as I got high school and whatever, it's like that's where it's like life kicks in and other things distract you and whatever, and that's where I really felt like that. Okay, you got to focus on faith to really grow in it. And anyway, so then fast forward through life, and I had just with career stuff and growing family and everything else, I didn't realize like how far of a backseat I'd let some of that stuff kind of go, I guess. And then, but anyway, diving into 75 hard, yeah, like I said, I'd read my 10 pages of whatever the book was that I was doing. So that's kind of making you reflect on things anyway. But then, picking up my Bible and reading just random 10 pages, or I'd use the Bible app and the morning scripture it would give you. I'd just read the chapter that scripture came from. But I was intentionally spending time with my faith and really, well, I guess, letting God talk to me. And then I remember listening to a podcast on one of my workouts one time that really hit me. And I think it was Levi Lesko I was listening to from Fresh Life Church. But anyway, something to the effect of like, he was talking about confidence in himself and like every like when he steps on stage, like he used to be at the point where he'd like throw up every single time before he'd get on
Hmm.
stage to go preach and like those types of things. But then like as he kept doing it and doing it and doing it and getting in these uncomfortable situations, it got a little easier. But like his prayer that he would talk to himself in every single time when he would go step into a room was like, the spirit that raised Jesus from the dead is living inside of me right now. And he's there were several other things, but that was the line that really hit me. And like every room that you walk into, like you're walking in there because you're supposed to be there. And for me, like that was a big thing, especially on the career side. Like I always felt like I was supposed to be there because I made the choice to work for this place and I've grown there for a long time and like all these things. But man, like every time you turn, it's like this weird competitive, corporate level environment, right? And so like that's
Sure.
just kind of not, it doesn't match my personality at all. And I'm there to do my job to the best of my ability. That's kind of how I was raised. But like I'm not going to compete with you for your job, or I've just never been that guy, I guess. So like
Hmm.
anyway, so that a lot of inferior feelings I think were there. But anyway, so I'd been in through this program a little bit and then definitely diving into the word um, and then talking like doing that like talking to myself of like there's a reason I'm here and I'm supposed to be here and like those things. I think that it didn't realize it, but I'm sure that was absolutely carrying. And when I walk into a room, I was probably carrying that with me. And I try to do that now to this day. If there's ever anything I'm afraid of, or if I'm gonna get nervous, or I'm gonna go talk to somebody, if I'm gonna have this like I'm working for myself now, so if I'm pitching a new client or whatever, like I'm walking in there with I'm supposed to be here and then, yeah, I think there's definitely a big part of that, man. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. I think yeah, those ebbs and flows, it's kind of interesting. And I think the more you go through them, the more you realize or it's easier to recognize it when it's happening.
Yeah,
When when the time is high or good or bad, or when you're in alignment or not,
yeah.
anyway, yeah, I just think that there's a presence there that you can tell, I think, without being able to put your finger on it sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think it's 100% him, the spirit in there and welling up and doing its thing. And um, yeah, it's crazy. And I actually just, the ebbs and flows piece too. I was listening to, I can't remember, this was on the radio, I think the other day.
Mhm.
Uh, but they were talking about how, like, when you get into your journey of faith, like the little things, it's kind of like the dopamine response. It was a podcast on dopamine. I didn't realize I was going to take a direction of faith on it. But anyway, the gal that was talking about the dopamine hits of like how things escalate because our brains and the chemicals were wired to just want a little bit more, a little bit more. So if you
Mhm.
expose yourself to something over and over, the dopamine gets the response feels less and less and less. So you got to escalate everything. Well, then the twist I didn't see coming was she brought this into like a faith lens. And, it's easy when you first ever go to church, maybe you first feel like God's talking to you for the first time. Like there's a congregation of 300 people in here, and man, the pastor was talking to me. Or you hear a song or something for the first time, and the hair stands up on the back of your neck, and like things like that. And you really feel like this presence. Like sometimes it can feel like um, man, like this thing just doesn't, I just don't feel it anymore. Like it's really tough for me to feel it, but it's maybe the thing that you're not feeling anymore is because it's time for you to dive a little bit deeper and take that next step or do that uncomfortable thing that, right now you're comfortable in this spot in your faith, but you're just not feeling it anymore. Well, maybe there's a reason, like you actually have to take this next step. And the cool thing with faith versus like maybe something that's more addictive is you have to make that constant choice to go do those things because God doesn't ever tell you you have to. He doesn't drag you along. He's there in that next step. He's there where you're at and he's there where you were. Like, but you have to take that next step, like put one foot in front of the other. Like you said, when you're hiking that mountain road, it's like
Yeah.
that you have to make that personal choice to take that next step, but then you'll probably have that aha moment again, or this next crazy thing will happen. You're like, okay, God, you're here. Or, I haven't seen you in a while or heard you in a while or whatever, but we're here, we're on track. And that's one consistent thing that's been cool in my life. And I'm sure other people who walk in faith and can probably relate a little bit is that all along the way through, I was a park ranger. I went to school for natural resources too. And
Okay. Yep.
I was a park ranger prior to getting into the outdoor world and that kind of stuff. But just all along the way, like in the most, you can't script it. Like in the most random times, you'd end up with one little conversation that would happen. And you'd be like, oh, okay. And you hadn't thought about it in a while or whatever, like your faith journey or this is always
Mhm.
the praying and slaying side of things kind of came later, but Light the Fire Outdoors was always a thing that as a little kid, I was like, oh, that's going to be my TV show name. And I'm going to be this outdoors superstar and like whatever. Right. But like the thing with it was, I was laying in bed one night and I remember this guy going, or had this thought cross my mind as I was laying there watching hunting TV, trying to fall asleep. And like, I'm going to do that one day. And then I remember like just as soon the thought popped through my head, like, you'll never probably know the right people. You'll never have enough money to do that. You'll never this, that, the other. And I was just like, felt really negative about it. And then just about as soon as those thoughts rolled through my head, I just felt God saying, hey, what's impossible for you is possible for me. And so I always let that sit. But then
Mhm.
never thought about it again for years. Years go by. I'm in college and I have my very first college roommate. And we end up having a conversation where this thing gets drug up. And you're like, okay, I guess I'm thinking about these things again. And then I was on my parks career and I had some random dude that rented a cabin one day and him and I got to talking about something else that brought it up again. This is
Mhm.
a few years later, I have another conversation. It's like you have these like milestone posts or the trail markers, maybe you could call them, that tell you what mile you're in on. And there's a lot of space between then and there. And there's a lot of stuff that can happen and distraction and everything else. But like you'll see that mile mark and be like, oh yeah, I'm on the right path here. And I feel like God's kind of put just little things in my life and even us having this conversation, right? It's just like, okay, like we're doing it because it's here and we're talking about it, or whatever the
Yeah.
case is. But it's kind of cool to just watch how that happens too through all this stuff.
Yeah. No, I think that's cool. And looking back, you can sort of see those moments in with better vision,
Yeah.
what one that's cool, that's relevant to this audience maybe is that my buddy and I we went fishing. This is a while, so I don't know how popular this river was outside of sort of Alaska then, but we went steelhead fishing on Kodiak Island, and So the pilot sort of drops us off at this lake, and we have a raft, and we got all our camp in the raft. And our pilot made some comment, and he was basically asking like, "Why am I dropping you off here?" Because again, we just come up with these plans, and then we just go figure it out, right? So we
Yeah.
we basically lost a day of pulling our raft through this like wetland. It was just a total mess. But later we had caught some Dolly Varden and a couple silver salmon, but there were no steelhead yet. We got a nice rainy day that brought some fresh fish in. And throughout the trip, my job was the fishing net. And my buddy's job was the rifle. He's the hunter. So if we're going to have a bear problem, he's the one that would, have a better chance of helping us out. So we go and, like I said, we have steelhead here in Cleveland. They're not native fish. So I do think there's something special about a native fish, a native species,
Oh yeah.
in its home waters, so to speak. And so I catch my first steelhead, and it was just beautiful. I mean, fully silver, hopped out of the water. We were swinging flies, and I'm so jacked up and excited. There's a series of photos of me holding the fish and watching the net just leaving my lap and floating down the river. And so we're sitting there, and we realize like, where is the net? And so I jump up on the bank, and I'm running trying to see this net. So the net is gone. Basically we have 3 days left, of fishing, and we don't have a net. And I'm like, oh my God, like, what are we doing? So I go back to the raft, um, and I'm thinking like, okay, what are we going to use for a net? And at the same time, my buddy yells like he's got a fish on and his line comes tight. And I'm like, all right, I'm just going to put it in my waders, and we'll just figure it out, like we got to get this guy's fish. So I
Yeah.
went out there, and this is, I'm not kidding you, maybe 20 minutes after my fish. Um, and his line goes slack, and he kind of puts his head down, and he's messing with me, and I don't know this yet, but he reaches his hand into the river. Aaron, I'm not kidding you, and he pulls out a perfect wooden, beautiful fishing net that had like floated down. We didn't see anybody when we flew over. We don't know where this thing came from. So
Yeah.
I wrote a story about it, and and had that published, and so we still have this net. But the reason I say that I can see this in hindsight now, um, is because so I grew up sort of I was baptized in a Presbyterian church, and then I went to a Bible church for many years, where my family still is, and I converted to Orthodox Christianity last year, and as part of that, you take a patron saint, and I say I chose, but really he chose me, Saint Herman of Alaska, who was the first saint in North America that came to Kodiak, and eventually lived on this little island called Spruce Island. And I just sort of at some point I put those things together that, oh, like he must have been like he must have given me this net.
That's
So
awesome.
some people, if you're not in this space, it might sound a little weird to you, but I think you understand the story, and that's sort of working in our life, even if we don't know that it's working. And so
Yeah. Yep.
sometimes when we have those low points, I think a lot of the times it's because we have this certain expectation of, control over our life or how we think it's supposed to go. And but then when you look back, you see, oh no, actually, like this was going on for a much better reason.
Oh, for sure, man. Yeah, and it's I think there's a lot of power in that. Like the rear view mirror, like the whole, like, you can always see it 2020s in the rear view. It's like I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of times because you can finally see like what the bigger picture was, and we don't get a chance all the time to see the bigger picture unless we try to paint it ourselves. But
Hmm.
yeah, and I was just listening to a podcast yesterday from Stephen Furtrick, I think. Elevation Church is his church, and
Okay.
he was talking about that, like how God will go about doing something versus like how we would have done it if it was up to us, kind of thing. And it never seems to make sense, but then it had a
Yeah.
reason why it went that way. But then yeah, come on, reaching down in the water, there's a net that just happens to be there, like those little,
Right.
but it sticks with you too, right? Because you're gonna be like, I'll
Yeah.
never forget that, and that's like that little thing that you're just like, there's just no way that that just happened, you know?
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah. I mean,
that's
it's
crazy.
we probably get those nets every day, and we maybe don't realize it. Or at
Yeah,
least I don't.
yeah.
So I
You
try
won't you
to.
won't see it until you look back on it, kind of thing.
Yeah. 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 I
Yep.
think that's true. Hmm.
No, very cool, man. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, with that too, I told you I'd keep you for 2 hours, but no, I think that's a cool way to end that too. And like I said, we always try to leave everybody with something good. And I don't know if you can, I hope maybe this is a little milestone for somebody listening to that, like, okay, didn't know how the podcast is going to wrap, but I'm going to get my fishing net out now and go
Yeah,
remember something. That's awesome.
that's a good ending, man. Yeah, I like it. Perfect.
For sure. Well, cool, man. Well, one more time, tell everybody where they can find your stuff. I know, like I said, I need to go deep dive on that and try to grab something off your website myself, but I want to make sure everybody else knows where to get stuff for your photography side.
Yeah, thanks so much. So my main website is dkendrickc.com. And then it has a link to my Substack, but really the best thing to do is to go to my Substack of Field Notes, which is dkendrickc.substack.com. And
Okay.
then, I write some ecological fiction. I, send out photos from trips I've been on, and then I release new fine art stuff. And sometimes I write some perspective based on what's kind of happening in the world. But that's a weekly thing. So you can sort of stay up to date through that Substack. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. And then Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance.
Yep, goatalliance.org. And then same on Instagram and Facebook, same thing across the board there. And yeah, check us out and drop me a note if you have any questions on supporting us or getting involved. Or honestly, if you just drew a goat tag and you want to talk about goat hunting, I'll give you as much information as I can, and I'll connect you with people who know what they're doing and can help you out. So yeah, please let us know. That's what we're here for.
Awesome, man. Well, very cool. Well, Kendrick, this has been an awesome conversation, dude, and a blessing to me. And yeah, hope everybody got something out of it. And go check out Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance. Go check out Kendrick's website. We'll have links to all that stuff in the show notes too, so you guys can hop over there and go check it out. But Kendrick, man, thank you so much for coming on.
You bet, Aaron. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate it. And yeah, hope to hear more.
Awesome, brother. Well, have a good one. Thanks.
Cheers. Yep.
Bye. Well, there you have it, guys. That was Kendrick Chittock with the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance, and what an awesome conversation. I loved all the stories that Kendrick had to share, especially that about his fishing net that miraculously floated back. And I know my life personally and Kendrick's and so many others that I know, when it comes to faith, there's just these moments that God puts in your life that just affirm that he's there, he's constantly with you, and there's just an undeniable, you can't shake it, it's undeniable some of the things that happen. You're like, there's just no possible way that was a coincidence, that had to be you, God. And I love that he speaks to us that way to let us know that we're on our path and to give us those faith to stand firm in moments where maybe we're getting shaken up a bit. We have those moments to look back on and be like, you know what, he's got to be here because he was there that time too. And I really love, Kendrick and what he was saying about, if you're not pushing your limits, or you're not really growing. And it reminds me of this verse of Romans 5:3-4. We can rejoice too when we run into problems and trials, for we know that they help us develop endurance, and endurance develops strength of character, and character strengthens our confident hope of salvation. Man, trials in our life, they're there to help us grow, and they're there for us to see things from different perspectives. If we don't ever run into a brick wall sometime during our life, what are we ever going to do? Because things are just too easy. We're never going to have to overcome anything hard. And I think there's a lot of power and strength that gets built when we do have to overcome hard things. And God always gives us the strength to get through them and do them, and just have hope. And when you're feeling weak, or you feel like something's just that mountain in front of you that you can't get over, first of all, remember there's awesome mountain goats at the top of that mountain. So if you climb it, there's a good chance you're going to see them and be in their country. But man, that view of that struggle below is going to be outstanding. And one of the things I've learned through my life too is that God's plan is often best seen in the rearview mirror. And I'd say the same for the climb to the top of the mountain, man. The view that you look back and see, and you're like, holy cow, look at what God did through all of that. You can see so much more from the top of that mountain that was put in front of you that you had to climb than you can from standing down below, letting it block out the sky. So with that, guys, I'll let that encourage you. I'm going to link to all of Kendrick's stuff, his field notes, his Substack, and of course all the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance links, socials, website, all that good stuff down below or in the show notes. And on the YouTube video, they're going to be down in the description as well. So be on the lookout for those. Go check him out. Kendrick is an amazing photographer, man. Go check out his photography. Yeah, man. With that, guys, go be a better person today. Go make someone else's life better. And as always, keep praying and slaying.